I've got an interesting one for you today. Pretty good story. I'm going to run through the diagnosis of what happened on this boat. We're in the engine room of a 54 Riviera. This is a twin IPS Volvo 950 boat. And we've got a Cummins Onan generator here. It's a 21 kW. This thing right here is the dinghy garage. Really all about just corrosion and what corrosion can do to these modern boats, these newer boats with all of these electronics. All of these engines, everything in here has a ECU. It has very sensitive computers on these things that throw all sorts of codes and will shut the engines down for all sorts of issues. And what goes along with that is corrosion can affect that big time. So here's what I had going on with this generator. Started a couple months ago where this generator would start up and run, and after about 5 minutes or longer, it would just shut down and it would throw a code. It would do this, every once in a while, and then within the last probably month, maybe 2 weeks to a month, it started to do it every single time we ran the generator. And it's super frustrating. So it would shut down, it would flash its lights, identifying the code. I go in the service manual, pull up the different codes, and it would flash twice, and then it would flash 9 times, number 29. And what that was a high battery voltage alarm or code, which is very strange, right? So high battery voltage on, this is a 24 volt system, 24 volt generator, indicates on the DC side, right? The 24 volt side, high battery voltage. Generator is supplied from what's called an auxiliary bank over in that corner with two 12 volt AGM batteries combined to make 24 volts. And that's a rare code, right? So very odd that you see a code like that. The first thought that comes to mind when it throws a 24 volt or high battery voltage code is either the batteries are being overcharged by one of those chargers, which would indicate a bad charger, or we have a regulator, a voltage regulator going bad on the alternator side of the generator that charges its own batteries. So I was tossing in between the two of those, trying to figure out which one it could be. Why are we getting too high of voltage? Very, very strange. So I turned the battery chargers off last week and got my voltmeter out and started playing around with some different things and starting to diagnose the issue. Chargers off, I went over there to the auxiliary bank and started looking at those with the voltmeter. And those were at a standing charge at about, 25 and a half, 26 volts. So on a 24 volt system for a standing resting batteries, that's totally fine. And then I looked up the spec in the service manual for what this generator considers high voltage, and it's 32 volts. So if this generator reads over 32 volts at its sensor, the ECU or wherever that sensor is, it shuts it down and it throws that code. Right off the bat, without the charger on, my volts at the batteries are good at the auxiliary bank. I threw the charger back on, came back to the battery bank, used the voltmeter again, and it came up to about 28 and a half, which matched what the C-Zone is a electronic, basically computer system that monitors the boat. You can turn off light, basically run the entire boat off what looks like an iPad. And so the voltage monitor on the C-Zone said 28 and a half, which is where it always usually sits. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't have an issue between the batteries and the generator. Now, is it the voltage regulator coming off the alternator that it's supplying itself? And before I even got to that, I started peeking around where the power comes into the generator. This is the main battery cable right here that comes from the battery to the starter. All of this on the starter solenoid right here, all of that was extremely corroded. The reason it was corroded was because this seawater pump a while ago failed and it was spraying water all over here. So it was spraying salt water. The tech was supposed to clean it up, whoever swapped that out, but I guess he didn't clean it up good enough. I spray the unit down with any corrosion block or anything like that. Over time, all of these continued to corrode. It was corroded real bad on both of the terminals here, and the post. They were green and they were very, very rusty. So I went to remove all of these to clean them up. I found that because of that corrosion, this bottom post that goes into this solenoid was loose. Now, whether it was loose for another reason, I don't know. I'm gonna chalk it up to the corrosion though. Potentially it lost its threads. And I tried to get this post to run back in, it wouldn't do it. I'm gonna chalk the whole issue up to corrosion and potentially a loose post going into this solenoid here. Whether the corrosion caused that or not, I'm not sure. It probably did. So I pulled the whole starter off. I figured out that I had to buy a whole starter. I went up to a place in St. Pete that rebuilds starters and alternators, and I bought a new starter from them, 24-volt starter, for about 300 bucks. I brought it back, and once again, these leads right here, all of these run back to the ECU over here. This is the direct cable from the batteries, and this is probably for some sensor. I'm not sure what this wire is here on the side, but you know, all of these work in line here. This is the point of contact for the 24 volts. It all comes right here and it all starts right here. So it would make sense that if we had a faulty connection, bad corrosion, all that good stuff, that it might throw a code to the generator ECU saying that, hey, we got a problem, we got too much volts, when we really don't. So this morning I threw this starter on, clean connections, put it all back together, ran the generator 3 separate times. Last time that I ran this thing, it was throwing these codes like crazy. I could not get this generator to run right. So now, after doing all this work, the generator starts and fires 3 separate times, runs for at least 10 minutes, and it appears, cross our fingers, that we're good to go. This is really just a video about corrosion. Keep corrosion out of your bilge. Check your wire connections. Make sure you don't have any corrosion. And keep your engine room clean. Keep salt water out of your bilge so stuff like that does not happen. And you can still see the residual rust on the block there. Now that rust isn't really going to hurt anything. I'm going to try to clean it up the best I can with some different cleaners. Issues like this will absolutely drive you crazy because from a distance, everything looks good. But if you get up close to it and you start going through the steps of everything and start diagnosing it, little things like that can cause big issues. I mean, I was literally just about on my way to pull off this entire box and try to get to that voltage regulator at the front of the engine where the belt is, where the alternator is, to try to see what's going on that side of things. It can be the simplest of things. Just remember that. And keep corrosion, keep all your connections in good shape. Don't let them get out of hand.